matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, but to the point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hey, welcome along on tonight's Mark Steyn Show. How would you like to be a victim of child sexual abuse and then find yourself on some lousy government committee next to a child sexual abuser? It happened to Sammy Woodhouse. Do you like those sci-fi tales of futuristic dystopias? You may already be living in one, say for the 1970s outfits. David Starkey is going to kick that one around for us. And Leilani Dowding is here. You do not want to miss that. Don't forget, we love your input, whether watching on telly, listening on wireless, or following my simultaneous interpretative dance version of the show on TikTok. You don't want to miss that. Email me via gbviews@gbnews.uk. You can tweet me @gbnews, or you can leave a crop circle in your back garden and we'll send a drone over to film it. But first, as ever, the news with Polly Middlehurst.
Mark, thank you. The top story tonight, the first British national named as Scott Sibley and understood to be a British military veteran has been killed in Ukraine. The Foreign Office today said they're urgently seeking further information on a second British national who's missing. They've confirmed both families are currently being supported. Meanwhile, Kyiv Mayor Vitaly Klitschko says 2 explosions have been heard in the region. That comes after Russian forces fired on the Ukrainian capital. And also as the UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres met there with the Ukrainian president, as well as visiting the town of Bucha. Antonio Guterres says he's doing everything he can to evacuate people from Mariupol at the steel plant in Ukraine.
But the men and women of the United Nations are working every day for the people of Ukraine, side by side with so many brave Ukrainian organizations. They are engaged in an enormously complicated mission under difficult conditions. This is one of the fastest scale-up operations we have ever undertaken, and we are very much aware that not everything is perfect.
Antonio Guterres. Well, President Zelensky says he believes with the help of the UN, an evacuation of the Azovstal plant is possible.
The most important thing is to see what the UN, can do to unblock Azovstal to save people's lives. We spent a lot of time discussing this issue, and I trust and believe that the Secretary-General and we all will be able to have a successful result, to have people return alive.
Here, the Prime Minister has said the behaviour of an MP allegedly caught watching pornography on his phone in the House of Commons chamber is unacceptable in any workplace. It follows the Labour leader calling for the Conservative Party to take action now against the MP. Boris Johnson says the case would need to go through the appropriate complaints procedure as his chief whip launched an investigation.
I think it's obviously unacceptable for anybody to be doing that kind of thing in the workplace. It would be the same for any kind of job up and down the country. Let's be absolutely clear about that. What needs to happen now is that the proper procedures need to be gone through. The independent complaints and grievances procedure needs to be activated, and we need to get to understand the facts.
And the Conservative MP Jamie Wallace has been charged with failing to stop after a car crash in November last year. South Wales Police say he's also been charged with failing to report a collision, driving without due care and attention, and leaving a vehicle in a dangerous position on the highway. Wallace recently came out as trans and revealed in a personal statement he'd been raped and blackmailed. The MP is due to appear before Cardiff Magistrates Court next month. On TV, online and on your radio via DAB+. You're with GB News. Now it's time for Mark Steyn.
Well, I suppose we could talk about Sir Keir Starmer crossing his legs in his thigh-hugging skinny pants, whatever the designated political obsession of the next fortnight is meant to be. But one has to be able to prioritise. And as we've reported on this show for months, so-called child sexual exploitation being a euphemism for ongoing gang rape, is a fact of life in towns up and down the realm for girls of 14, 13, 12. Once in a while, one of the girls plucks up the courage to go to the police. The police lose the evidence because a remarkable number of the perps seem to be acquaintances of theirs. The social workers stick the file in the bottom drawer because diversity-wise it's all a bit complicated and sensitive, and the local politicians give it a wide berth because there's nothing in it for them. Rape, assault, being doused in petrol, dangled off balconies, and then being stonewalled and stymied by the various arms of officialdom: Rotherham, Rochdale, Telford, Aylesbury, Banbury, leafy county places. They're all different, and yet in a certain very troubling sense, they're all the same. It doesn't speak well for a nation when its most vulnerable girls are abused and trashed, and everyone agrees to look the other way. I thought I couldn't be any more disgusted by government, social services, law enforcement's behaviour in these scandals. And then Imran Khan came along, not the cricketer and deposed Pakistani PM, but an entirely different Imran Khan, MP for Wakefield, and found guilty earlier this month of sexually assaulting a 15-year-old boy. He promised to resign from Parliament, but he hung on until today, in fact, before resigning, because that way he gets his full month's paycheck. And that's the way these lousy, scummy people think. Here's the thing, though. A year and a half ago, Mr. Khan, the guy who likes sex with kids, was put on a Home Office panel to advise on child sexual exploitation. If you're not cynical, you should be. We all know how this happens. The men convicted in these so-called grooming gang trials are very strikingly, very overwhelmingly British Muslims of Pakistani origin. That's unfortunate, but it happens to be what we used to call a fact back in the days when facts were important, even in the United Kingdom. But if you're a politician, you think, we don't want it to look like we're all Islamophobic here, so find me some Pakistani chappie to stick on the committee, and then we'll be in the clear on the old racism front. This Wakefield fella, he seems just the ticket, and apparently he's quite eager to do it. That's how you square the circle in terms of the politics. We all know that. Unfortunately for the politics of it, a victim of Mr. Khan had already written to the Conservative Party about various of his activities. They claim, just like South Yorkshire Police do, we have no record of having received that letter. So he was a credibly accused pedo sex fiend. At the time, he was put on a committee along with victims of child sexual abuse. He'd actually have been sitting next to my next guest if the pandemic hadn't come along and ensured that, in fact, these meetings were conducted via Zoom call. Otherwise, they'd have been on adjoining chairs around the table. One of his fellow committee members joins me now, a survivor of Rotherham and a good friend of this show. If you knew a tenth of what Sammy Woodhouse had been through, you would be amazed she'd survived it all, but she has, and abuse survivors shouldn't have to be sat on committees with abusers because, yet again, the state has failed her and all the victims. Sammy, great to see you. What do you, I mean, this is beyond belief that of the handful of people who get to be on a committee about child sexual abuse, one of them is actually a sexual abuser of children.
Yeah, I'm absolutely disgusted. I feel really angry, actually. I'm not shocked because I just think from everything that I've experienced through my own life, everything I've witnessed and heard from other survivors and what's been happening around the country, nothing just seems to shock me anymore. I feel quite dead towards it, if I'm honest. But, you know, the fact that this brave male survivor not only has come forward to the police, which is so difficult to do and go through the court process, you know, he very bravely contacted the Tory party because he didn't want this man to be in power and he was trying to help and protect other people. So, you know, for him to do that is very brave and courageous, but then, of course, he's being ignored. And to top that off, this politician has then been allowed to work on a panel, you know, talking about and dealing with a report that was meant to be trying to help what's going on in the country. I did that in good faith. And I'm absolutely disgusted the fact that he, as a politician, didn't say, well, actually, I'm under investigation for this crime. It's probably, you know, in everyone's best interest if I don't get involved in this. I mean, he shouldn't even be a politician in the first place. But, you know, even the Tories haven't done anything. I personally think there needs to be a full investigation. But, of course, what will probably happen is what usually happens. They might conduct an investigation. Nothing will really happen about it. We'll talk about it on air or in the news for a couple of days. You know, it goes under the carpet. And then we'll be back in a couple of days after talking about a new scandal. I think it's quite appalling about what's going off with government officials. You know, we've heard this week as well that MPs are watching porn. You know, I want to know how many people have been charged, MPs and politicians, how many people have been charged or under investigation when it comes to things such as abuse, rape, exploitation. These people are paid by the public, you know, by us, you know, to run this country and to try and sort our country out. Our country's a mess. Well, what do we expect? These are the people running it.
That's very true. And in fact, just to connect this, he might be a backbencher. He might be an actual Minister of the Crown. This guy who likes to watch porn on his telephone, sitting next to a female member in the House of Commons. What connects it is the recklessness of these guys. They think they're untouchable. So they think, as you wouldn't be able to do if you worked in a tea shop, that you can watch porn while you're sitting there in the House of Commons. Likewise, this guy thought the fact that he was in fact a paedophile made no difference to him going and sitting on a committee on child sexual abuse. Everything I know about this, Sammy, I've really learned from spending time with you, whatever it was, 5 or 6 years ago, because everything you said to me that day, now I hear echoes of when these stories come along. So, like, the victim goes to the trouble of filing a complaint and mails it in, and then, we don't seem to have any record, there's nothing about that in our files, which is what South Yorkshire Police did to you and all kinds of other young girls in Rotherham. So let's look at it this way. Complaining about a politician is difficult, specifically because that's powerful. It's not like being abused by a taxi driver or whatever. You know a lot about this sort of stuff. Have you ever had cause to actually make a complaint about a politician?
I have multiple, actually. In fact, the first time I ever spoke out with Andrew Norfolk at the Times newspaper, I named a then politician and my perpetrator. And think at the time he stood down, but he then went on publicly to say, you know, he was thinking about taking legal action for defamation, etc., which of course, you know, he wouldn't win because I was telling the truth. And later on, when I did testify in court against my perpetrator, that particular event, my perpetrator was found guilty on. But then probably about 4 or 5 years ago, myself and other people in Rotherham tried to report a politician. In fact, I reported the then politician to that many people in government, and you know, right the way up to the top, to the Ministry of Justice, the Home Office, Prime Minister. I was actually placed under investigation for harassment towards the politician. Now, South Yorkshire Police did do their investigation. I wasn't charged with anything, but unfortunately, a police officer at South Yorkshire Police did send an email with false information about me to this then politician, which very funnily happened to land in the hands of a journalist of a national newspaper. Now, when I did get informed of that, I did say I will take legal action. This is untrue. Not only is this politician trying to have me criminalised, trying to ruin my career, I then received letters from their legal team saying that they was going to take me to court to sue me, so I had to get a solicitor involved. Of course, that never went to court because they had no grounds. But for me personally, I've had, you know, more stress from, you know, people such as politicians that have reported and police officers, etc., than the actual rapist. I mean, I remember going and reporting a police officer. There was people in the community that actually did a protest about, you know, me, the journalist, and the story. It's so difficult to come forward because they're such powerful people. You know, they've got all the knowledge, they've got the money, you know, the power. What do we have? You know, it's scary.
Well, you know something. Well, what's very interesting to me, because I'm under investigation by the British TV regulator, Ofcom, right at the moment, and I don't know who's complained about me or anything, and we're told, you know, no, the complainant, that has to remain anonymous to ensure that the process can all stay fair, so that I don't seek revenge on the person who's complained about me. And that's just in some itsy bitsy little nothing stupid complaint about a television show. But you're saying that when you complain about a politician for a serious criminal act, that South Yorkshire Police inform the accused politician of your name so that he can use all his powerful friends to destroy you and your reputation?
Well, this one was actually a female. The first one was male. Now, in a police investigation, of course, you have to put the name forward because you have to give that person, you know, the right to respond. So, yeah, you know, both people did know my name. And as well, I actually spoke about them publicly as well, as I did feel it was in the public's best interest. A investigation did go underway, and a lot of the complaints that me and the other survivors made was upheld. So we did go on to prove that we was telling the truth, but it was just such a fight and a battle to get there. And, you know, as we know, as lots of truths coming out, is there are perpetrators in very powerful positions, whether that's a politician, a police officer, a teacher, a social worker, etc. You know, and a lot of perpetrators deliberately go into these positions to gain more power, so, you know, people don't come after them.
Well, let me ask you about that, Sammy, because that is of interest to me. From your town, we had this case just a couple of months back where Lord Ahmed, who Tony Blair put in the House of Lords, Lord Ahmed was convicted of child sexual abuse. We have a guy who for, you know, decades was the most famous Liberal member of Parliament, Sir Cyril Smith in Rochdale, who was getting up to all kinds of things there. And do you think that seems slightly disproportionate to me? In other words, do you think there is a problem with people who actually behave as this guy Imran Khan did, that you just hit on, you drag a 15-year-old boy upstairs, you watch porn with him, you rape him, and what's he going to do about it? Because he won't even know who you are until he switches on the TV and he sees you on the BBC talking to Emily Maitlis or whatever, and then he's really got to have guts even to challenge, even to tell what that guy has done to him.
Yeah, and I do definitely think they are definitely more paedophiles working within government. And as I say, I would like, and I think the public need to know just how many people are on investigation or on the sex offenders register. I think we have the right to know that. But yeah, I think that this is a serious problem. Of course, when you come forward as a survivor, it is so hard to, be believed, and we're victim blamed a lot. And one thing that I got told quite often is that I wouldn't be a reliable witness. I think we need a serious shake-up, not just in government, but the entire system, because we still have a system that is not fit for purpose. And what people need to recognise, and I say all the time, when we come forward as survivors, we want to be supported, we want to be believed, we want to go through that court process and try and get justice. And there's too many hurdles, unfortunately, in the way. Now, I know there's good professionals out there, because from my own experience, I've got, both positive and negative experiences from professionals. But I work with them as well. And I know they're as frustrated as what we are to make sure that the system is better for when people are coming forward.
Well, I heard those words you said a few minutes ago when you said you feel these revelations, you said you felt dead inside about them. I can, you've lived enough for about 20 lifetimes in terms of what's happened to you. And it's unbelievable that the corruption in the system goes all the way up even to the Home Office, so that when they establish a panel, they think, oh, we'll have Sammy Woodhouse, and let's get the sort of guy who likes abusing people as well, and that way it'll all be even. It's absolutely outrageous, and we do appreciate you joining us to keep this thing before the public, because there has to be a reckoning for this. It's disgraceful. It shouldn't be happening, and people shouldn't be getting away with it. And officialdom, the people who've nudged and winked at the perpetrators of this thing, whether they're the policemen in South Yorkshire Constabulary, or whether they're social services, or whether they're the Home Office, shouldn't be getting away with it. Sammy, thank you as always. Your takes coming next, GBViews at gbnews.uk, and David Starkey and Leilani Dowding. No, it's not like Nigel's show. They're not going to be doing their Strictly routine. We'll have to talk them into that for another occasion. Well, you never know. We might do tonight. Stick around. They might do it.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes & Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes & Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you, or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hey, let us get to your comments. Phil says, thank you for keeping this story alive, Mark. Well, you know, somebody has to. I don't understand why every show isn't. I understand, you know, yeah, crossing your legs, that's fantastically interesting. I cross my legs occasionally. Maybe we'll get a side camera on and we can do 20 minutes on whether my crossing my legs arouses Boris Johnson. It didn't used to when we were at The Spectator. But at a certain point, you have to talk about something. You've only got a certain amount of time. And the fact is, in Telford, for example, they've had these child sex gangs. It's a new town, so it's easy to do the arithmetic on these things. They built it in the 70s, basically, and they've had this child sex slavery going on pretty much for close to the entire history of the town. James says, why are people demonized for covering the grooming gang scandal? Because it conflicts with the myths of diversity. The myths of diversity are that the nice, shishi little gay couple who like to go antiquing at the weekend can live at 27B Coronation Gardens, and the fire-breathing imam and his 4 child brides can live next door at 27A Coronation Gardens, and they will all get on and be part of one happy, vibrant, diversified family. And there are complexities in that. And this guy, Imran Khan, actually he applied for his case to be kept secret because as a Muslim, he said, his drinking alcohol and engaging in sex with persons of the same biological sex would get him in big trouble in the Islamic world and might actually result in a danger to his life. That's one of the many consequences of diversity, because back in Sudan or Mirpur in Pakistan, it'd be a lot tougher for him to get a drink. So his alcoholic intake. These are all part of the vast quilt of diversity. Graham says, so what should we do when the whole system is broken? You have to know what the system is designed for. If a constabulary is there to enforce the laws without fear or favour on the principle that the citizen is equal before the law, regardless of whether he's from a powerful local Pakistani Muslim family or he's some broken down white loser schlub who just sits around in his string vest and drinks all day in the front garden, you've got to know what the purpose of the system is. Is the system to enforce the law equally, or is the system to mediate group relations between favoured identity groups and unfavoured identity groups? Bernadette says, thank God Mark not talking about Partygate. Cake, 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 cake. I'm so bored by cake. Tackling serious issues, child sex scandals, fair play. You know, Cakegate is only worth talking about if you're talking about what underlies it. That these guys knew, even as they were putting you in lockdown, that they weren't going to be locked down, and they because it was all rubbish. That's worth talking about. Who had what slice? Was it a Madeira cake? Or was it a Victoria sponge? And who had what slice? It's all rubbish. That's rubbish unless you're going to talk about the iniquities of lockdown. And Paul says, what an inspiration and hero Sammy is, Mark. I first met her, whatever it was, 5 or 6 years ago, and she seemed, Sammy will forgive me for saying this, but she seemed rather fragile to me then and delicate, as I would be, as you would be, if you'd suffered a 15th of what she's gone through. And I'm pleased to see her thriving and prospering and surviving. And that's why we keep having her on, and we'll have her back. As a kid, I wasn't much into, you know, the kind of science fiction where you have these vast, dystopian, dehumanized landscapes in which people are mere creatures of the state and wander around glassy-eyed, dressed like dancers on a 1970s variety show. Yeah, even with Jenny Agutter, I could never really get into that. I was always much more interested in how we got from here to there. And it seems to me that right now we're on that continuum. We've left here somewhere behind us, and we're en route to there. I happen to be Canadian. Right now, a Canadian in Canada who is not, quote, fully vaccinated has an entirely useless passport. Mine says on page 2, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Canada requests in the name of Her Majesty the Queen, Sa Majesté la Reine, for you francophones, all those whom it may concern to allow the bearer to pass freely without delay or hindrance. And it used to be that passports issued in the name of Her Majesty the Queen were taken seriously and would have the desired effect on foreign officials. But you can't even get it in front of a foreign official because Her Majesty's Canadian government won't let you leave the country, won't let you get on a plane if you're unvaccinated. It's like the Iron Curtain. A giant maple curtain has descended along the US border. That seems odd and disturbing to me. Then we have various arms of officialdom in the United Kingdom, the United States and the European Union threatening to ban Twitter because its new owner, who's only been in the job 48 hours, is less enthusiastic about policing speech than these jurisdictions would like. That's also rather strange. The way they're disappointed that a private entity is not enforcing a crackdown of freedom of speech as zealously as they'd like. Meanwhile, the President of the European Commission, Cruella von der Leyen, is fast-tracking her plans for digital identity throughout the EU, and America's laughably misnamed Department of Homeland Security has set up something called a Disinformation Governance Board, presumably because, as one of our viewers put it to me, the Ministry of Truth name was already taken. 2 centuries ago, Alexis de Tocqueville noted that there was a time when, in theory, kings had, quote, power almost without limits. But they couldn't make use of it because the king was in his palace and you were in your hovel 200 miles away and he had no idea what you were up to. A pantalooned emissary might come prancing into your dooryard once every half-decade and give you a hard time, but for the most part you got on with your life relatively undisturbed. In Tocqueville's words, although he remained the arbiter of all things, the details of social life and of individual existence ordinarily escaped the emperor's control. He lacked the means to micro-regulate your life in every aspect. Now he has the means. Something big seems afoot, and for the big stuff, we turn to Dr. David Starkey. David, it's always great to see you. Am I sort of getting a bit too overheated here? That things seem to be changing rather fast on things like freedom of movement and freedom of speech and those kind of things?
Oh, Mark, I mean, what a terrible thing to say that you get overheated. It's part of the charm. But it's also, really, I do too, it's also essential in banging home these big changes. You see, I think there's a major connection between the last segment of the show, Rotherham and the child abuse and the MP and whatever, and what you're talking about now. If you have a society which lacks natural unity, if you've got a society where there is this wonderful thing called diversity, with your imam living next to your gay couple, do you know what? We've ceased to be a nation. We become an empire. And OK, you're quoting de Tocqueville on emperors, but empires have always had to be managed from the top. They've always been managed by bureaucracies. And what we're now seeing is a new kind of bureaucracy. It thinks it's a bureaucracy of virtue. Because we can't be trusted, you know, a gay man and a Muslim can't actually be trusted quite to negotiate with each other. So they've got to be put in an order. And, you know, when you were talking about which victim group comes top, well, of course, you know, an imam comes very much above a mere gay man. And a gay man very much above a white man. And, of course, a Muslim woman comes pretty well top. So, but it's all got to be arbitrated. You've got to have rules. And the rules, I'm afraid, have got to be enforced. And going alongside all of this, we've now got a means of doing it. Your emperor's emissary only had what? He'd got a horse. He might have a local police constable. He'd got a few informers on the ground. Now, of course, we have the internet. We have this complete record of what people are saying, much of what they're doing. So this is why the police, bizarrely, don't deal with child abuse. They focus on somebody who emits a rude tweet to one of these privileged groups. Do you see what I'm getting at? That we are, because it's a society which can't manage itself. If you go back to the world that de Tocqueville was talking about, he was talking about America at the end of the 18th, the beginning of the 19th century. It was by and large a self-regulating society. People were much like each other. They achieved their own relationships. Because we're so wildly different, because the state says one person is better than another, you've got to really have, for the first time, the complete policing of everyday life. And it's as I said, it's a benign dictatorship.
Yeah, that's actually a hugely important point, David, because the fact that we have all kinds of people jostling around within these islands means that we necessarily need a more powerful state to mediate social relations between people who don't have a lot in common, basically.
Yeah, and also is because the state has decided that on the whole, bizarrely, minority groups, very often minority groups that actually hate the state, need to be privileged. I mean, so the state is, you know, we had, under old-fashioned socialism, we had the redistribution of wealth. We're now getting a deliberate attempt at redistributing social and political capital, at actually redistributing cultural capital. We're saying that the old traditional culture is terribly bad. We should be promoting, you know. The bizarre thing, my own University of Cambridge accepts sponsorship from Stormzy. If Stormzy's lyrics, you know, which are violent, misogynist, profoundly homophobic, if they were uttered by a white man, the university would go, God, we couldn't touch such a person. But because who he is, his skin colour, he is privileged. And this is this terrible thing. You know, you were talking about these deeply old-fashioned concepts, like equality before the law. What if you are so old-fashioned? You know, you need to keep up. We need to talk more often. You know, I need to introduce you to this new world. And of course, if it's bad in Britain, in Canada, you know, under the regime of Trudeau the Perfect, it is so much further down that road.
Do you think that, well, let's put it this way. I think a lot of the hardcore craziness generally gets invented in America. Then, in that rather pathetic way they do with cheeseburgers and pop songs, Her Majesty's Dominions adopt it a couple of years later and try to play catch-up. But continental Europe doesn't seem quite on board with the nutso wokeness. And in fact, even someone like Macron prides himself on speaking out contre le wokisme, as they call it there. Do you think there's some kind of fundamental difference between the Anglo world and the Europeans on this stuff?
Oh, yes. I mean, there is. Again, funnily, the Anglo world on the whole used to believe in freedom. But because, you see, I think also what's going on now with this attack on liberty, as you correctly describe it, it is a wave of Puritanism. What we're actually seeing is a new religion, the old religion of the Anglo-Saxon world, puritanical Christianity, which, you know, had all sorts of, in many ways, very good manifestations. The anti-slavery campaigns, the abolition campaigns, in a more controversial way, the attack on alcohol, the whole attempt at in early 20th century America because of the terrible problems of drinking and so on. All of these are forms of Puritanism. What I think we've got is an attempt at imposing a new sort of morality. And I've been looking at this in quite considerable detail. If you go back to the very beginnings of the Puritan world, of the world of reform at the beginning of the 16th century, what's extraordinary is it moves even more quickly than the whole revolution that's associated with Twitter and tweeting and wokery. You know, you can date wokery beginning in about 2009, really getting going in 2015 and roughly culminating now essentially through the means of Twitter and particularly the share button, which enables you to do the pile-on and whatever. You know, if you go back to the beginning of the Protestant Reformation, it's very, very similar. You've got a chap, you've got Martin Luther, you've got a critical theory, you've got Erasmus and his views of the language of the New Testament, and you've got a media revolution, you've got printing, and you've got the viral bit, which is actually doing it not in Latin, which only 10 people can read, but in German or English or French, which everybody can read. And do you know what? Those early stages of the Reformation move faster in the 16th century than the woke revolution has done in the 20th. So this is why it is very much entrenched in the Anglo-Saxon world. We're the natural home of Puritanism. It's why it starts in America. Blame the Mayflower for the good and the bad.
Yeah. No, that's certainly true. And the point, that's an interesting point about the Protestant Reformation, except that this new religion doesn't allow for the possibility of redemption. So we have white kindergartners in certain American school districts being told that they are inherently evil just from the colour of their skin, which is kind of confusing for a 5 or 6 year old.
Yeah, but sorry, this is authentic Puritanism. The Puritans didn't believe everybody was equally saved. The doctrine of Puritanism is the doctrine of the elect. It's the belief that there is a group which is privileged, which is predestined to salvation, just like the woke, and the rest of us are wicked. It's Puritanism which is responsible for the witch hunt. You know, the witch hunts happen in places like Scotland. They don't happen generally in England, except in weird Puritan places like East Anglia. But of course they're everywhere in freedom-loving Massachusetts. You know, that's why the Crucible is based there. You see what I mean? A Twitter storm is very much like the treatment that was meted out to a suspected witch. You were plunged into water. If you sank, you were of course innocent, but you drowned. But if you floated, you were a witch and you were burned. And that's exactly what a Twitter storm does. So again, Puritanism had no doctrine of forgiveness. That's sloppy religion. That's, you know, Catholicism or Anglicanism, and it's relaxed about it. Whereas so the woke has taken over directly. And the other thing that's very striking about the Protestant Reformation is its violence. The violence of the attack on statues, the violence of the attack on stained glass, but also the violence of its language, the sheer hatred. You see, the resemblances are just astonishing. And this is why it's affecting us. We are going through, well, the Americans talked about 2015, not as the Great Awakening, which is one of these various movements of Puritanism, you know, the abolition of slavery, the attempt at teetotalism and all the rest of it. They talked about 2015 as the Great Awakening. So it's part of that pattern. And you get it on your side of the Atlantic, in Her Majesty's dominions there. We get it here in, you know, Her Majesty's dominions here, but in a bit of a dilute form, a little bit less extreme, and without quite those Puritan passions of America, thank God.
But instead of witch finders general, we do have our share of hate finders general going out and about on the Twitter accounts to track these people down. Thank you very much, David Starkey, for distilling what's going on here. It's always great to see you. Stump the Steyn's coming up. You can email me, ask me anything. Plus, two words. Leilani Dowding. That's all you need to know. Coming straight up.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you, or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Coming up on Dan Wootton Tonight, he left one of the world's most successful bands after being cancelled simply for expressing an interest in politics. Now, former Mumford & Sons musician Winston Marshall sits down with Dan to explain why free speech means more than gold discs and Grammys. He'll reveal what really happened in the shock split and speaks out against what he's described as Spotify's Soviet-style censorship of outspoken artists. Another must-see interview coming up on Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. on GB News.
Just a follow-up to that childhood hepatitis story we were talking about the other day, for which the United Kingdom is ground zero. England alone accounts for almost half the cases in the world of this childhood hepatitis. We now have a second death in Wisconsin. For years I've been shadow banned at Twitter. Doesn't really bother me, but I can understand why it's annoying for people who follow me and then never see any tweets from me. So yesterday, the day after Elon Musk bought Twitter, this happened. Jeff Hansen tweeting here. Ooh, this is the first time I've seen a tweet direct from Mark Steyn in my feed since I've been following him. Which was, I don't know, back in 2012 or whatever. So I responded, hey, thank you, Elon. Much appreciated. Elon himself is still doing his shadow ban jokes. Here we have the Shadow Ban Council reviewing a tweet. But inside Fortress Twitter, the ancien regime sees the forces of liberation approaching and is frantically trying to destroy all the evidence. So the shadow ban machine is being switched off and taken apart and buried in pieces out back. Let us go to someone who's been the victim of shadow banning and all the rest of it, the one and only Leilani Dowding. Leilani, what do you make of the, after whatever it is now, 48 hours, are you liking the look of the new Twitter regime?
Do you know what I am? I'm actually really torn, and because I'm loving the lefty liberal meltdowns that are going on right now. Them absolutely crying that people are going to be able to say what they want on Twitter. You know, obviously, you know, nothing's going to be mean, but talking about all the stuff that's been going on for 2 years that everyone like you and I and other people we know have been shadow banned over. So I am definitely loving that. But I'm not sure that he's actually the hero everyone he wants him to be. Because if this online bill goes through, this online harms bill goes through, then that's going to affect free speech online and on social media a lot more than, you know, what he can control. So, you know, if you look at what's happening to you with Ofcom and what Ofcom did to all news outlets over the last 2 years, if that kind of starts happening with social media, then it's going to be a huge problem. You know, it's not going to be, you know, all these new apps that are popping up that allow people to speak the truth and stop shadow banning and allow free speech. They're going to be monitored really harshly, and then it's going to be, you know, up to interpretation on what is misinformation, what is harmful. And so the same thing could happen when that goes through, and it could get worse.
Yes, it's interesting that the UK, the EU, the US all reflexively expect Twitter to be managed down to every single tweet. This has come up mostly, Leilani. I think it was there before, but it's accelerated during the COVID, quite disgracefully, where anything that's other than the official version from the government and its so-called public health officials like Fauci in Washington and Chris Whitty and Patrick Vallance in the UK, anything other than the official version has to be marked as disinformation. Now we've got this new wrinkle on it. I was just interested to get your take. I mentioned a second baby has now died in Wisconsin. We don't know where the other baby who died from, the other child who died from. But this childhood hepatitis, children under 5, over 100 cases in the UK alone. Before Twitter says you can't talk about it, before they all start marking you as disinformation, what do you think's actually going on here?
Well, I posted an article the other day that I'd read that was talking about how the lack of exposure of common adenoviruses is what could be causing it. You know, during lockdowns, the kids have been locked away. They haven't socialized. They've been taken away from their friends. And this constant sanitizing of everything with these toxic chemicals is going on. And a lot of experts have been saying that it's possibly the lockdowns and the effects of lockdowns that could be causing a detrimental effect on their immune systems. Now, this is something that so many doctors have been trying to say for the last 2 years, that it's just not healthy. And the healthiest kids that I know, look, I'm a horsey person, I have 2 horses, I'm usually covered in muck, so I know a lot of horsey people. And the horsey kids that found germs all the time, they're probably the healthiest kids I know. They're not, you know, wash your hands obviously before you eat, wash your hands when you get home, wash your hands if you've been mucking out your horses or grooming them or something. But this constant sanitizing, anytime you touch something, I refuse to do it. I've not done it in 2 years. I don't want that stuff on my hands. And, you know, I just do regular hygiene and wash them when I'm going to eat. And, you know, that we need to have germs in our body to have an immune system. If you take away all the germs, sterilize everything, of course our body's going to react to you know, all these viruses and bacteria that are floating around. Well, no,
but it's a sense for you and for me, because we're not 5 years old. The world was still sane, and you were allowed to crawl around. You'd be crawling around in the dirt with your friend who has the horses, and you'd put your hand in something, and then you'd crawl away somewhere else, and you were just passing germs back and forth to yourself with your mates all day long. Now, that's when you pick up your immune system. And if you don't, so if for your first 2 years of life, you're basically kept in this artificial sterile bubble, this isn't an unforeseen consequence. It was perfectly foreseeable that this would weaken those 2, 3, 4-year-olds' immune systems.
Absolutely. And anyone who tried to say that, again, was a COVID denier. They were a granny killer. They were selfish. Anyone that said, look, it's not normal to keep children away from each other. How are their immune systems ever going to develop if you're sterilizing every single thing, wiping every surface down, using these chemicals any time they touch anything? It's just not healthy, and it doesn't create an immune system. And I don't know, I'm not the expert, but I read what experts are saying, and they've said this for the last 2 years. They're saying it now, that it's potentially the cause. Are they going to be allowed to keep saying it? Who knows?
Well, you know, you say you're not an expert, but we've had rule by experts for the last 2 years, and just about everything on the whole planet, except in China, is totally wrecked, Leilani. So maybe we need less experts.
Well, that's it. Like, you know, where's this science? We try to follow the science. They keep changing it every 2 minutes. I think we need people that are using some common sense for once.
Yeah, well said. We've been following that science right off the cliff. If there's anything in your world that isn't wrecked, just mail it in to us, and we'll try and get somebody with a knighthood in the Public Health Department to wreck it in the next 6 weeks. That's our pledge to you. Thank you very much, Leilani. It is always great to see you. In our closing moments, let's go stumping. James says, is voter ID a greater good or a bad idea? I think if you vote in an election, you should have to provide proof that you are entitled to vote in that election. Many places around the world manage to provide it. India, for example, one of the few places that doesn't is the United States, which is why it has dirty, stinking, filthy, rotten, corrupt elections that you don't know the result of, as in upstate New York, until 3 months later. Upstate New York is like upstate Sudan in that respect, and I'm doing an injustice to Sudan maybe there. And unfortunately, Tony Blair increased mail-in voting, which did no favours to the UK system either. Twitter user says, if only 2% of channel migrants are sent to Rwanda, how soon do you think the boats will start coming again? Well, you have to be a calculator of risk. That's still higher than your odds of dying of the COVID. That's going to do it for us. Never fear, Dan Wootton is here to thump your Thursday, as no one else can, for 2 jam-packed hours, because who doesn't like it when the hours are packed with jam? Stay safe, stay free.
Good evening, Alex Deacon here with your latest weather update from the Met Office. Another dry day for the vast majority tomorrow, probably a bit sunnier for many of us, and as a result, feeling a little warmer as well. This area of high pressure has been controlling our weather for most of this week. There are signs of weather fronts getting closer for the weekend, more on that in a moment, but for the time being, high pressure promising a dry night for the vast majority. Just the small chance of 1 or 2 showers over the Northern Isles and perhaps later in the night across the southeast of England. Certainly eastern parts of England keeping a fair bit of cloud, but for many we'll have largely clear skies. And again, it will be pretty fresh in the morning. Temperatures well down into single figures, and in rural parts of northern England, Northern Ireland, southern Scotland, there will be a frost, maybe as low as -2 or -3. So yes, a cold start to Friday, but for quite a few of us it will be a sunny start to what will be a fine spring day. Again, eastern England's mostly staying cloudy, particularly East Anglia and increasingly across the southeast with maybe 1 or 2 showers, but also eastern Scotland seeing some cloud bubbling up and the odd shower here and there. And again, eastern areas, temperatures struggling a little bit, 12, 13 at best, but in the sunshine further west, many places up to 16, 17, maybe 18 Celsius in western Scotland. Quite quickly, temperatures dropping away through tomorrow evening. So again, turning quite cold as we head into the weekend with largely clear skies, a touch of frost. We are going to see a change for Scotland and Northern Ireland on Saturday. More clouds spilling in here with a little bit of rain, particularly by the afternoon, getting through the central belt to Northern Ireland. Late in the day across Northern England, but for most of England and Wales, Saturday is going to be a fine day, dry and fine. And after a chilly start, again, some good spells of sunshine lifting the temperatures in the mid